The wind screamed across the barren white expanse like a living thing determined to scour away every trace of warmth from the world. And Kieran Voss knew that if he did not find shelter within the hour, he would freeze to death in these God-forsaken mountains. His breath came in ragged gasps that turned to ice crystals before they could fully leave his lips, and his fingers had long since lost all feeling despite being wrapped in layers of wool and leather. He had been tracking the deer for 3 days, pushing farther into the wilderness than he had ever ventured before, and the sudden blizzard had caught him completely unprepared. The animal tracks had vanished beneath fresh snowfall hours ago, and now he was simply trying to survive, putting one foot in front of the other through drifts that sometimes came up to his thighs. The landscape offered nothing but endless white, punctuated by the occasional dark slash of bare tree branches. Kieran had grown up on the frontier, had spent 28 winters in these harsh lands, but he had never experienced cold quite like this. It was the kind of cold that made your bones ache, that turned your thoughts sluggish and dangerous. He knew the signs of freezing to death, had seen it happen to old Marcus 3 years back when the trapper had gotten caught out in a storm. First came the shivering, which he was doing now. Then the shivering would stop, which meant you were truly in danger. After that came the confusion, the overwhelming urge to sleep, and finally the quiet death. He crested a small rise, squinting against the wind-driven snow, and that was when he saw it. A splash of color against the white, something that was not snow or rock or tree. Green, he thought, though the swirling snow made it hard to be certain. Kieran changed direction, angling toward whatever it was, his mind already running through possibilities. A tent, perhaps, or supplies someone had abandoned. Even a bit of canvas could mean the difference between life and death out here. As he drew closer, his steps faltered. That was not canvas or supplies. That was a body. Half buried in a snowdrift, face down and motionless, lay what could only be an orc. Kieran had seen orcs before, of course, though always from a distance. They sometimes came to the frontier settlements to trade, though they were never welcome, never trusted. The frontier folk remembered the wars, remembered the raids that had happened when Kieran was just a boy. His own father had lost his left arm to an orc blade defending their homestead. He should keep walking. That would be the sensible thing, the safe thing. Orcs were dangerous. Everyone knew that. They were stronger than humans, fiercer, born for violence, and this one might not even be alive. From the looks of it, she had been here for hours, maybe longer. The snow had drifted up around her body, covering everything below the waist. Kieran took another step forward anyway. She was a woman. He could see that now. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker than the pale mint shade he had seen on the orcs who came to trade. Her hair was black, cut short and practical, and he could see the point of one ear poking through the dark strands. She wore leather armor, the kind meant for traveling, and what he could see of her arms showed lean muscle beneath the green skin. He crouched down beside her, his knees sinking into the snow, and reached out with a trembling hand to touch her neck. Her skin was like ice, and for a moment he thought he was too late. Then he felt it, the faintest flutter of a pulse beneath his fingers. She was alive. Barely. Kieran sat back on his heels, his mind racing. He still needed to find shelter himself. He was already exhausted, already dangerously cold. Trying to help her might kill them both. The smart thing, the logical thing, would be to leave her here. She was an orc. His people and her people were not friends. If the situation were reversed, would she help him? He looked down at her half-buried form, at the way the snow was already starting to cover her completely, and he knew he could not do it. He could not simply walk away and let her die, no matter what she was. Getting her out of the snowdrift was harder than he expected. She was buried deep, and his cold-numbed hands struggled to find purchase. When he finally pulled her free, he was shocked by her weight. She was tall, perhaps only an inch or two shorter than his own 6 feet and solid with muscle. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he dragged her onto more level ground, and he could see her face properly for the first time. She was young, he thought, though it was hard to tell with orcs. Her features were strong, with a broad nose and high cheekbones, and 2 small tusks protruded from her lower jaw. Her lips had a grayish tinge to them that he knew meant severe cold exposure. She needed warmth, and she needed it soon. His own homestead was 5 miles back the way he had come, perhaps a bit more given the terrain. 5 miles through a blizzard, carrying someone who probably weighed nearly as much as he did. It was impossible. It would kill him. Kieran looked around at the empty white wilderness, then down at the unconscious orc woman, and then he started laughing. The sound was brittle and slightly hysterical, whipped away by the wind almost before it left his mouth. Impossible. Everything about this day was impossible. He got her positioned across his shoulders, grunting with the effort of lifting her dead weight. She was heavy, even heavier than he had feared, and the additional burden made his legs shake. But he had carried deer carcasses before, had hauled fallen logs and bags of grain. He could do this. He had to do this. The first mile was agony. Every step sent jolts of pain through his already exhausted legs, and the extra weight made him sink deeper into the snow with each stride. The orc woman was a dead weight across his shoulders, her arms dangling down his chest, her head lolling against his back. He kept one hand hooked around her wrists to keep her from sliding off, and used the other to help maintain his balance as he pushed through the drifts. The wind had not let up, and visibility was next to nothing. Kieran navigated by instinct and memory, trying to retrace his path back toward home. He knew these mountains, had hunted and trapped in them for years, but in the whiteout conditions everything looked the same. He could only hope he was heading in the right direction. By the second mile, he was no longer sure which hurt more, his legs or his shoulders. The orc woman seemed to grow heavier with each step, and he had to stop twice to adjust her position when she started to slip. His breathing came in harsh gasps that burned his throat and lungs. The cold air felt like knives with every inhalation. Halfway through the 3rd mile, he fell for the first time. His foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, a root or a rock, and he went down hard. He managed to twist as he fell, taking the impact on his side rather than landing on top of the orc woman. They tumbled into a drift together, and for a long moment Kieran just lay there, gasping for breath, staring up at the gray sky that was barely visible through the swirling snow. "Get up," he told himself. "If you stop now, you die here." He forced himself to his knees, then grabbed the orc woman and hauled her up again. His shoulders screamed in protest as he settled her weight across them once more. His legs shook so badly he was not sure they would hold, but somehow he got them under him and started walking again. The 4th mile was when the shivering stopped. Kieran knew what that meant. His body was shutting down, conserving heat for his vital organs. It was the beginning of the end. He could feel his thoughts starting to slow, to drift. It would be so easy to just sit down in the snow for a moment to rest. Just a brief rest, and then he could continue. No. He bit down hard on the inside of his cheek, using the pain to focus his wandering mind. Keep moving. One foot in front of the other. Do not stop. Do not think. Just walk. He started talking to himself, to the unconscious woman on his shoulders, to the wind itself. Rambling, half-coherent monologues about nothing and everything. About his farm, about the crops he would plant in the spring, about the deer he had been tracking. anything to keep his mind engaged, to fight off the seductive pull of sleep. "Nearly there," he heard himself saying, though he had no idea if it was true. "Just a bit farther. Cannot stop now. Come too far to stop now." The landmarks started to look familiar as he slogged through the 5th mile. That twisted pine tree, split by lightning years ago. The outcropping of red stone that looked like a sleeping bear. He was close now, so close. His homestead was just over the next rise, just through that stand of trees. He fell again 20 yards from his front door. This time he did not have the strength to twist, and they both went down in a heap. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, and for a terrifying moment he could not breathe at all. When air finally came rushing back in, it brought with it a wave of dizziness that made the world spin. The door. He could see the door of his cabin, dark wood against white snow. So close. He crawled toward it, dragging the orc woman with him, his arms wrapped around her waist. 10 yards. 5. His hand closed around the door latch, and he nearly wept with relief when it opened. The inside of the cabin was not much warmer than outside, the fire in the hearth having long since gone cold, but at least it was out of the wind. Kieran kicked the door shut behind them and lay there on the floor for a long moment, his chest heaving, his entire body shaking with exhaustion. "Move. You are not done yet. The fire. You need the fire." He forced himself to crawl to the hearth, where thank God he always kept kindling ready. His hands were shaking so badly it took him 4 tries to strike a spark with his flint and steel, but finally the tinder caught. He nursed the tiny flame carefully, adding small sticks until he had a proper fire going. As soon as the flames were large enough, he added several larger logs. The orc woman was still lying where he had left her, motionless on the floor just inside the door. Kieran dragged her closer to the fire, positioning her on the rug in front of the hearth. Her skin was still ice cold, her lips gray. Frostbite, he thought. She probably had frostbite. He needed to warm her slowly, carefully. He pulled off her boots first, wincing at how stiff and cold the leather was. Her feet were like blocks of ice, the skin discolored. He rubbed them gently between his hands, trying to restore circulation. Then he moved to her hands, her arms, working methodically to warm each extremity. Her leather armor was wet from the snow, and he knew he needed to get her out of it. Wet clothes would only make things worse. His cold, numbed fingers fumbled with the buckles and straps, and it took him far longer than it should have to get the armor off. Beneath it, she wore a simple tunic and leggings, also damp. Those needed to come off too. He tried to be respectful about it, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible as he stripped off the wet clothes and wrapped her in every blanket and fur he owned. When she was cocooned in layers of wool and animal pelts, he finally allowed himself to tend to his own needs. His own wet clothes came off, his frozen fingers barely able to manage the task. He dressed in dry wool, thick socks, everything warm he could find. Then he collapsed into his chair by the fire and just sat there, staring at the flames, his whole body shaking. He had done it. Against all logic and reason, he had carried an orc woman 5 miles through a blizzard, and they were both still alive. Probably. He looked over at her still form wrapped in blankets. Her chest was rising and falling at least. That was something. Kieran had no idea what happened next. He had saved her life, but she was still in terrible danger. Even if she survived the night, infection could set in. She could lose fingers or toes to frostbite, and if she did survive, what then? He had an orc in his cabin, an orc woman. What was he supposed to do with her? Those were problems for tomorrow. Right now, he was barely capable of keeping his own eyes open. The warmth of the fire, the exhaustion of the ordeal, it was all catching up with him. He knew he should stay awake, should monitor her condition, but his body had other ideas. His eyes drifted shut, and consciousness slipped away. Kieran woke to the sound of someone moving. His eyes snapped open, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife he kept on his belt, and his gaze fell on the orc woman. She was sitting up, the blankets pooled around her waist, and she was staring at him with eyes the color of amber. "You," she said, her voice rough and low. "You are human." "I am," Kieran said carefully, very aware that he was unarmed and she was close enough to reach him in 2 steps. "My name is Kieran Voss. I found you in the snow yesterday. You were dying." She looked around the cabin, taking in the rough wooden walls, the simple furniture, the fire crackling in the hearth. Her gaze came back to him, wary and confused. "Why would you help me? I am orc." "You needed help," Kieran said simply. "I could not just leave you to die." She was silent for a long moment, studying him with those strange amber eyes. Then she looked down at herself, at the blankets wrapped around her bare skin, and a flush of darker green spread across her cheeks. "My clothes. They were wet. You would have frozen. They are drying by the fire." He gestured to where her tunic and leggings were draped over a wooden rack near the hearth. "Your armor is over there as well." She pulled the blankets more tightly around herself, and he could see the tension in her shoulders. She was afraid, he realized. Not of the cold or her injuries, but of him, of being vulnerable in a human's home. "I am not going to hurt you," Kieran said quietly. "I did not carry you 5 miles through a blizzard just to harm you now." 5 miles, her eyes widened. "You carried me 5 miles. It was either that or leave you to die. Like I said, I could not do that." He stood slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening. "You should eat something. When did you last have food?" "I do not know." She touched her head gingerly, wincing. "I was traveling. There was a storm. I tried to find shelter, but the wind was too strong. I fell, I think. Hit my head. After that, nothing until I woke here." Kieran moved to his small kitchen area and ladled some stew from the pot he kept hanging over the fire. It was simple fare, just venison and root vegetables, but it was hot and filling. He poured a portion into a wooden bowl and brought it to her, along with a spoon. She took the bowl hesitantly, as if expecting a trick. When none came, she began to eat, slowly at first and then with increasing hunger. He watched her, noting the way her hands shook slightly, the care with which she held the spoon. Her fingers were wrapped in strips of cloth, he saw now. He must have bandaged them while she was unconscious, though he had no memory of doing so. "What is your name?" he asked. She swallowed another mouthful of stew before answering. "Gracia." "Gracia," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "That is a good name." "It is an orc name," she said, a defensive edge to her voice. "I know. Still a good name." He got his own bowl of stew and returned to his chair. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the whistle of wind outside the cabin. "I need to check your feet," Kieran said when they had both finished eating. "For frostbite. You were in that snow for a long time." Gracia looked like she wanted to refuse, but after a moment she nodded and extended one blanket-wrapped foot toward him. Kieran unwrapped the cloth he had bound around it and examined her toes carefully. The skin was discolored, darker green than the rest of her, and when he pressed gently she hissed in pain. "Frostbite," he confirmed. "Not as bad as it could be, but you will need to be careful. Keep them warm and dry if infection sets in." He did not finish the sentence. They both knew what happened with infected frostbite. "Why are you doing this?" Gracia asked suddenly. "Truly, humans do not help orcs. We are enemies." Kieran sat back, considering his answer. "My father would say you are right. He fought in the border wars, lost his arm to an orc warrior. He hated your kind until the day he died." He met her eyes. But he also taught me that a person's worth is not determined by what they are, but by what they do. You did not choose to be born orc any more than I chose to be born human. And you were dying. What kind of man would I be if I left someone to die just because of what they were born as? Gracia stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her amber eyes. You are strange, Kieran Voss. So I have been told. She pulled her foot back and wrapped it carefully in the blankets again. I should go. As soon as the storm passes, I will leave. I do not wish to bring you trouble. You are not going anywhere with frostbitten feet, Kieran said firmly. Besides, the storm has not let up. Listen. They both fell silent, and the howl of the wind outside was clearly audible, a constant keening wail that spoke of snow and ice and death. Gracia's shoulders slumped slightly. Then I will go when the storm ends and my feet are healed enough to walk. That will be at least a few days, maybe more. You are welcome to stay as long as you need. He stood and began gathering the empty bowls. There is only one bed, but you should take it. You need the rest more than I do. I can sleep in the chair. I cannot take your bed. You are already doing too much. I insist. You are injured and you are my guest. He set the bowls aside and added another log to the fire. Rest. I will wake you if anything changes. Gracia looked like she wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was clear in the lines of her face. Finally, she nodded and allowed him to help her to the narrow bed in the corner of the cabin. She settled into it carefully, still wrapped in blankets, and within minutes her breathing had deepened into sleep. Kieran returned to his chair and stared into the fire. What had he gotten himself into? He had an orc woman in his cabin, injured and vulnerable, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. When word got out, and it would get out, there would be talk. The frontier folk were not kind to those who consorted with orcs, but that was a problem for later. Right now, his only concern was making sure Gracia survived. The storm lasted for 3 days. 3 days of howling wind and endless snow, of being trapped inside the small cabin with a virtual stranger who happened to be a different species. It should have been unbearable, Kieran thought, but strangely it was not. Gracia was prickly at first, defensive and wary of every kindness he offered. She tried to insist on sleeping in the chair, on doing her own cooking, on refusing help with her injuries. But Kieran was stubborn in his own quiet way, and gradually she began to accept that he truly meant her no harm. They talked, in fits and starts. Small conversations at first, carefully neutral. She told him she had been traveling to meet with her clan elders, that she was a scout for her tribe. He told her about his farm, about the crops he grew and the animals he raised. Slowly, as the hours turned to days, the conversations grew deeper. "You live alone?" Gracia asked on the second day, watching him mend a torn shirt by the fire. "I do now. My father died 2 years ago and my mother passed when I was young. No siblings, no wife." "Why no wife? You are not unpleasant to look at for a human." She said it matter-of-factly, without any hint of flirtation, and Kieran had to suppress a smile. "Thank you, I think." As for why no wife, the frontier is harsh. Women are scarce out here, and those that are here tend to prefer men with more to offer than a struggling farm and a questionable future. "Then they are fools," Gracia said bluntly. "A man who would carry a stranger 5 miles through a blizzard is worth 10 pretty men with fat purses." Kieran did smile at that. Perhaps, but the heart wants what it wants, and apparently hearts do not want struggling farmers. The human heart is strange then. "Among my people, strength and honor are prized above wealth. We value those things too, just perhaps not as much as we should." He tied off the thread and examined his work. The stitches were not pretty, but they would hold. "What about you? Is there someone waiting for you back with your clan?" Gracia's expression grew shuttered. "No, I am not. I do not fit well with my clan. I am too soft, they say. Too willing to see good in those who are not orc. Sounds familiar, Kieran said quietly. She glanced at him and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition of shared experience. They were both outsiders in their own way, both too willing to cross the lines their people had drawn. On the third day, the wind finally died. The snow stopped falling and a watery sun broke through the clouds. Kieran opened the door and stepped outside, marveling at the transformed landscape. Snow had piled up in drifts taller than he was, completely burying the split-rail fence around his property. It would take days to dig out. How far to the nearest settlement? Gracia asked from behind him. She had donned her dried clothes and armor, though she still moved gingerly on her healing feet. 10 miles to Millbrook, the closest village, but I do not think you should travel yet. Your feet are still healing. I cannot stay here forever, Kieran. People will notice. They will come looking for you eventually, and if they find me here. She did not finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Let them come. I will tell them the truth, that I found someone dying in the snow and I helped them. And when they learn I am orc, what then? She moved to stand beside him, looking out at the white expanse. I know how humans see my kind. We are monsters to you, savages. They will think I attacked you or that you are a traitor for helping me. I do not care what they think. You should. You have to live with these people after I am gone. She was quiet for a moment, her breath misting in the cold air. I will leave tomorrow. My feet are strong enough. Kieran wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her face. She had made up her mind. At least let me help you provision for the journey. You cannot travel empty-handed. She hesitated, then nodded. I would be grateful for that. They spent the rest of the day preparing for her departure. Kieran packed food, filled a water skin, made sure her armor was properly secured. He tried not to think about the fact that this strange, prickly orc woman had somehow become someone he would miss. That night, as they shared what might be their last meal together, Gracia spoke quietly. I have not thanked you properly. For what you did. You saved my life, Kieran Voss. That is a debt I will not forget. You do not owe me anything, Kieran said. I did what anyone should have done. But anyone would not have done it. Most humans would have left me to die. You are different. She met his eyes across the fire. If you ever need help, if you are ever in trouble, find me. Send word to the Stonefang clan in the northern reaches. I will come. The same offer stands for you. This cabin will always be a safe place for you should you need it. They were words of friendship, of gratitude, but Kieran felt something deeper stirring in his chest as he looked at her. Something he did not have a name for, something that made the thought of her leaving feel like a physical ache. He pushed the feeling aside. She was orc, he was human. Their peoples were enemies. A few days of forced companionship did not change that. She would leave tomorrow and he would return to his solitary life, and that would be the end of it. Except it was not. Gracia left at dawn, her pack laden with supplies, her feet wrapped in extra layers of cloth for warmth. Kieran stood in the doorway and watched her trudge through the snow until she was just a small figure in the distance, and then she was gone. The cabin felt unnaturally quiet without her. He tried to go about his normal routine, tending to the animals, clearing snow, repairing the damage the storm had caused. But his mind kept drifting back to her amber eyes and her blunt manner of speaking, to the way she had looked at him like he was something rare and unexpected. A week passed, then two. The snow began to melt as winter grudgingly gave way to early spring. Kieran heard the rumors when he went to Millbrook for supplies. Talk of orc scouts in the area, of increased patrols along the border. Tensions were rising between the human settlements and the orc clans. Whispers of old grievances and new slights. He thought of Gracia constantly, wondered if she had made it back to her clan safely, if her feet had healed properly. He told himself he was being foolish, that he barely knew her, that she was probably already back to her life and had forgotten all about him. Then one night, nearly a month after she had left, he heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find Gracia standing there, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage wrapped around her shoulder. Her face was pale, her breathing labored. "I am sorry," she said, swaying on her feet. "I had nowhere else to go." Kieran caught her as she collapsed, and for the second time he carried her into his cabin. The wound was deep, a blade cut that ran from her shoulder down across her upper arm. Kieran cleaned it as carefully as he could, grateful for the herbs his mother had taught him to use. Yarrow to stop the bleeding, comfrey for healing, feverfew for the pain. He stitched the wound closed with thread he sterilized in the fire, his hands steady despite the fear churning in his gut. Gracia drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked, sometimes lucid enough to answer questions, sometimes mumbling in the Orcish language. He learned that there had been a fight, that she had been blamed for bringing shame to her clan by associating with a human. They had cast her out, and when she refused to leave quietly, they had attacked her. "They would have killed me," she whispered as he wrapped clean bandages around her shoulder. "My own clan, because I showed kindness to you." "I am so sorry," Kieran said, the guilt heavy in his chest. "This is my fault." "No." Her hand caught his, surprisingly strong despite her injuries. "It is theirs, and it is mine. I knew the risk when I told them about you. I told them anyway because I thought they should know. I thought they should hear about a human who showed more honor than many orcs I have known. I was wrong to hope they would understand." He finished tying off the bandage and helped her drink some willow bark tea for the pain. "You can stay here as long as you need, as long as you want. I cannot ask that of you. If my clan finds me here, they will kill us both. Then we will make sure they do not find you." He met her eyes, his expression firm. "You said this would always be a safe place for me. Well, it is a safe place for you too. I meant what I said." Gracia's recovery was slower this time. The wound had been deep. An infection set in despite Kieran's best efforts. For 3 days she burned with fever, thrashing and crying out in her delirium. Kieran barely slept, constantly changing her bandages, forcing water and medicine down her throat, bathing her with cool cloths to bring down the fever. On the 4th day, the fever broke. She woke weak and shaky but clear-eyed, and Kieran nearly wept with relief. "You stayed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I go? I have been nothing but trouble for you. First you saved me from freezing, now this. You should have sent me away. Gracia, listen to me." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You are not trouble. You are my friend. And I am not going to abandon my friend just because things get difficult." "Friend," she repeated, testing the word. "I have never had a human friend before." "Well, now you do. Better get used to it." She smiled, just a small upturn of her lips, but it transformed her face. For the first time, Kieran saw her not as an orc or an outsider or someone who needed his help, but simply as a woman. A strong, brave woman who had been hurt by those she trusted and yet still found it in herself to trust again. The realization struck him like a physical blow. He cared for her, not just as someone he was helping, but as someone important to him. Someone he wanted to know better, to spend time with. Someone whose smile made his heart beat faster. It was impossible. It was forbidden. It was completely and utterly foolish. It was also undeniable. Spring arrived in earnest, and with it came new challenges. Gracia's wound healed slowly, leaving a thick scar across her shoulder. She regained her strength bit by bit, helping Kieran with the farm work as soon as she was able. They fell into a comfortable routine, working side by side during the day, sharing meals and conversation by the fire at night. They did not speak of what would happen next. Gracia could not return to her clan, and staying with Kieran meant living in constant fear of discovery. But somehow, in the midst of the impossibility of it all, they found moments of peace. Kieran taught her about farming, about coaxing life from the stubborn earth. She taught him about tracking, about reading the signs the forest left for those who knew how to look. They traded stories, shared laughter, built something fragile and precious between them. He tried not to think about how right it felt to have her there, how the cabin no longer felt empty, how he woke each morning looking forward to seeing her face across the breakfast table. He tried not to notice the way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he was not paying attention. A look that held something more than friendship, something that made his breath catch. The first real test came on a warm day in late spring. Kieran had gone into Millbrook for supplies, leaving Gracia hidden in the cabin. He was loading sacks of flour onto his wagon when he heard the voices. "Did you hear? Harold's boy saw an orc near the old Mather's place. Said it looked like a woman. An orc woman this close to town. That does not bode well. You think they are scouting for a raid?" Kieran's blood ran cold. He forced himself to continue loading the wagon to keep his expression neutral, even as his mind raced. If people started looking for Gracia if they found her at his cabin? Probably just passing through, another voice said dismissively. But we should increase the patrols just to be safe. Can't be too careful with orcs. Kieran finished his business as quickly as he could and drove the wagon home at a pace just short of reckless. He found Gracia in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds between the young plants. She looked up as he approached, and her smile faded when she saw his face. "What is wrong?" He told her what he had heard. Her expression grew grim as she listened. "I need to leave," she said immediately. "If they are looking for me, I cannot stay here. I will not let you be caught harboring an orc." "Where will you go? Your clan cast you out. You have no one else." "I will manage. I am a scout, Kieran. I know how to survive in the wild. Alone. Constantly hiding, constantly running. That is not a life, Gracia. It is better than getting you killed." Her voice rose, sharp with fear and frustration. "Do you understand what they would do to you if they found me here? You would be labeled a traitor. They would drive you from your home, maybe worse. I cannot let that happen." "Then what do you suggest? Because I am not going to ask you to leave, and you clearly will not leave willingly." They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Gracia's shoulders slumped. "There might be another option," she said slowly. "There are places far to the north where the frontier is even more wild, where humans and orcs sometimes coexist, not in harmony exactly, but in mutual tolerance. We could go there, together, leave my home." "My farm." Kieran looked around at the land he had worked so hard to cultivate, the cabin his father had built. "This is all I have, Gracia. I know, and I would not ask it of you if there was any other way." She met his eyes, and the vulnerability in her gaze nearly undid him. "But I do not want to leave you, Kieran. These past months living here, working beside you, I have been happier than I have been in years. I know it is selfish of me. I know I should just go and make things easier for you, but I cannot seem to make myself do it. You want to stay." His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I want to stay," she admitted quietly. "But not if it means putting you in danger, so we could go north together, start somewhere new if you wanted to, if you—" She trailed off, uncertainty flickering across her face. Kieran closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He took her hands in his, looking up into her amber eyes. "Gracia, I need you to understand something. When I found you in that snow, when I carried you back here, I did it because it was the right thing to do. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about doing the right thing. It became about you. about not wanting to live in a world where you were not in it. Her breath caught. Kieran, I know this is complicated. I know our peoples would never accept it, but I do not care. I care about you, Gracia, more than I have cared about anyone, and if going north is what it takes to keep you safe, to keep us together, then that is what we will do. You would give up your home for me. She sounded awed, disbelieving. A home is just a place. You are. He searched for the right words. You are everything else. The laughter and the companionship and the feeling of not being alone, that is worth more than any piece of land. Tears gleamed in her eyes, and when she spoke her voice was thick with emotion. I do not deserve you. That is not for you to decide. He smiled up at her. We deserve each other. We deserve to be happy, even if it means starting over somewhere new. She pulled him into an embrace, careful of her healing shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her waist. They stood there in the garden, holding each other as the sun warmed their backs and the spring breeze whispered through the young crops. When do we leave? Gracia asked against his shoulder. Soon. I need to sell what I can, pack what we need. Give me a few days to make arrangements. And then we go north and we build a new life, together. She pulled back just enough to look down at him, and the expression on her face made his chest tight. I love you, Kieran Voss. I do not know when it happened, but somewhere between you saving my life and teaching me to plant tomatoes, I fell completely in love with you. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both monumental and entirely natural. My fierce, stubborn, beautiful Gracia, I love you. She kissed him then, and it was nothing like he had imagined. Her tusks made the angle different and her lips were fuller than a human woman's. But it was also perfect, warm and soft and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. Preparing to leave was harder than Kieran had anticipated. He had lived his entire life on this farm, had memories woven into every corner of the property. His mother's herb garden, still growing strong. The tree where his father had taught him to climb. The field he had plowed for the first time at age 12, certain he would never manage to make the furrows straight. But every time doubt crept in, he would look at Gracia and remember why he was doing this. She was worth it. They were worth it. He sold most of his livestock to neighboring farmers, keeping only a sturdy pack horse to carry their supplies. Tools, clothing, seeds for planting, preserved food, everything they would need to start fresh. He told people he was moving east to try his luck in the larger settlements, and most seemed to accept the explanation without question. The night before they were set to leave, Kieran walked through the cabin one last time. It looked bare now, stripped of most of his possessions. Just the basic furniture remained, left for whoever might claim the property next. Having second thoughts, Gracia asked quietly from the doorway, more like final goodbyes. He turned to face her. This cabin has been my whole world for so long, it feels strange to leave it behind. We can stay if you truly wish it, I would understand. No, he crossed to her and took her hands. My world is not this cabin anymore. My world is wherever you are. She squeezed his hands, her expression soft. We should rest. We have a long journey ahead tomorrow. They lay together in the narrow bed that night, Kieran's arms wrapped around her from behind. It was not the first time they had shared the bed since admitting their feelings, but it still felt new and precious. Her skin was warmer than a human's, and he could feel the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. Tell me about the north, he murmured into her hair. What do you know of it? Only stories. They say there are valleys where the growing season is short but the land is rich. Communities of outcasts and wanderers, people who did not fit in the traditional settlements, humans who tired of their rigid ways, orcs who were cast out like me, even some elves and dwarves if the tales are true. Sounds almost too good to be real. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is simply different with its own challenges and hardships. But at least there we might be able to walk freely together without fear of being hunted for it. That would be nice, Kieran agreed. Walking with you without having to hide. They were quiet for a while, and he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then her voice came soft in the darkness. When we get there, when we have built our new home, I want to marry you. In whatever way we can, I want us to be bound together properly. Kieran's breath caught. You want to marry me? Is that so surprising? I just admitted I would give up everything to be with you. Marriage seems like the natural next step. I suppose it does. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder, right at the edge of her scar. Then yes. When we get to the north, when we have made our new life, we will find a way to marry. I promise you that. Good. He could hear the smile in her voice. Now sleep. Tomorrow begins our great adventure. The journey north took nearly 3 weeks. They traveled carefully, avoiding the main roads where possible, camping in the wilderness each night. Kieran had expected it to be difficult, even frightening at times. And it was sometimes, but it was also wonderful. They talked for hours as they walked, about everything and nothing. Gracia told him stories of her childhood in the Orc clan, of learning to track and fight and survive. He told her about growing up on the frontier, about the loneliness of farming alone after his father died. They shared their fears and hopes for the future, their dreams of what their new life might look like. At night, they would make camp and sit close by the fire. Kieran would play an old wooden flute his father had made, simple melodies that drifted through the darkness. Gracia would lean against him and hum along, her voice a low rumble in her chest. They saw signs of other travelers occasionally. Old campsites, wagon ruts in the softer ground, but they encountered few people on the road, and those they did meet were usually as eager to avoid contact as they were. The farther north they went, the wilder the land became. Forests grew denser, mountains rose higher, and settlements became few and far between. We must be getting close, Gracia said one evening as they made camp beside a swift flowing river. The air feels different here, freer. Kieran had to agree. There was something about this place, a sense of possibility that he had not felt back home. Or perhaps it was simply that he was with Gracia, and that made anywhere feel full of promise. The next day they crested a ridge and saw it. A valley spread out below them, green and lush despite being surrounded by snow-capped peaks. Smoke rose from several chimneys scattered throughout the valley, indicating a settlement of some kind. There, Gracia breathed. That must be it. They descended into the valley, following a narrow trail that wound between trees and over streams. As they drew closer to the settlement, Kieran began to notice details. The buildings were a mix of styles, some clearly human-built, others with the heavier construction favored by orcs. He saw what might have been an elven dwelling as well, built up in the branches of an ancient oak. People were working in fields and gardens, and as Kieran and Gracia approached, several stopped to watch them. An old human woman with gray hair, an orc man with massive shoulders, a human child who stared with open curiosity. No one seemed particularly alarmed by the sight of a human and an orc traveling together. "Welcome, travelers," the old woman called out as they drew near. "You look like you have come a long way." "We have," Kieran replied. "Nearly 3 weeks from the southern frontier." "The frontier, eh? And what brings you to our little valley?" Kieran glanced at Gracia, who nodded encouragingly. "We are looking for a place where we can be together without judgment, where a human and an orc can build a life side by side." The old woman's weathered face creased into a smile. "Then you have found the right place, young man. We do not much care what folks are here, only what they do. You willing to work hard, contribute to the community?" "We are," Gracia said firmly. "We can farm, hunt, build. We will earn our place here." I am sure you will. The woman gestured to the valley. We have some unclaimed land on the eastern edge, good soil and a stream nearby. You can build there if you like. Community helps with raising barns and such. We look after our own here. Kieran felt a weight lift from his chest that he had not even realized he was carrying. Thank you, truly. No thanks needed. Just be good neighbors, that is all we ask. She turned to go, then paused. Oh, and welcome to Green Hello. Hope you will be very happy here. They chose their plot of land carefully, a gentle slope near the stream with good sun exposure. The soil was dark and rich, perfect for growing crops. They set up a temporary camp while they began the hard work of building. True to the old woman's word, neighbors came to help. The orc man Kieran had seen earlier, whose name was Throck, helped them fell trees for lumber. A human family named the Ventons showed them the best places to quarry stone for a foundation. Even the elven family, though they kept mostly to themselves, sent down bundles of treated wood that was remarkably resistant to rot. It took 2 months of hard work, but by midsummer they had a small cabin built. It was rough but solid, with a good fireplace and windows that let in plenty of light. Gracia insisted on building the bed large enough for both of them, and no one so much as blinked at the implication. They planted a garden, cleared more land for crops, built a shed for tools and supplies. Each day brought new challenges, new aches and pains, but also new triumphs. Their first successful harvest of lettuce and radishes. The day they finished the chicken coop and introduced 6 hens to their new home. The evening they sat on the porch they had built together and watched the sun set over the mountains. Happy? Kieran asked, his hand finding Gracia's. Happier than I ever thought possible, she replied, lacing her fingers through his. This is everything I dreamed of when we left. A home, a community. You, speaking of which, Kieran said, his heart suddenly pounding. I have been thinking about what you said. About wanting to marry when we got here, when we had built our new life. Yes. Gracia turned to look at him, hope bright in her amber eyes. I think we have done that. Built our life, I mean. The cabin is finished, the garden is growing, we have friends and neighbors who accept us. He took a deep breath. So I think it is time to make good on that promise. You want to marry me, truly, more than anything. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Gracia, from the moment I found you in that snow, my life has been better, brighter, fuller. You are my partner, my best friend, the person I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life. So yes, I want to marry you if you will still have me. She laughed, and it was a sound of pure joy. Of course I will have you, you foolish man, I love you. I want nothing more than to be your wife. Then we should do it properly. Tomorrow I will ask the elders if there is someone who can perform a marriage ceremony. We will invite the whole community, make a celebration of it. A wedding, Gracia said wonderingly. I never thought I would have a wedding. Well, you are going to have one, and it will be perfect. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, giving them time to prepare. The community threw themselves into the planning with enthusiasm. The Ventons offered their barn for the ceremony and reception. Throck promised to provide meat for the feast, the result of a successful hunt. The old woman who had first welcomed them, whose name turned out to be Margaret, took charge of organizing the whole affair with military precision. Gracia wore a dress that Margaret's daughter had sewn, simple but beautiful, in a deep green that complemented her skin. Kieran wore his best shirt and trousers, cleaned and mended until they looked almost new. His hands shook as he stood at the front of the Venton barn, waiting for Gracia to appear. When she did, walking down the makeshift aisle between rows of benches, his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. The dress fit her perfectly, and someone had woven small white flowers into her short dark hair. but it was the expression on her face that truly captivated him, a mixture of joy and love and wonder that mirrored his own feelings. The ceremony was performed by an old human priest who had retired to Greenhollow years before. He spoke of love and commitment, of two souls choosing to walk through life together, regardless of what challenges they might face. The words were traditional, meant for human marriages, but they adapted them to fit. Do you, Kieran Voss, take this woman to be your wife, to love and cherish in times of plenty and times of want, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Kieran said firmly, his eyes never leaving Grasha's face. And do you, Grasha of the Stonefang clan, take this man to be your husband, to love and cherish in times of plenty and times of want, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Grasha said, her voice strong despite the tears gleaming in her eyes. Then by the power vested in me, and in the sight of this community, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. Kieran did not need to be told twice. He pulled Grasha down to him and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, the priest raised his hands. Friends and neighbors, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Voss. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Kieran had ever experienced. There was food in abundance, roasted venison and fresh bread and vegetables from a dozen different gardens. Someone had brewed a batch of ale, and it flowed freely. Music filled the air as people brought out instruments and took turns playing. Kieran and Grasha danced, though neither of them was particularly skilled at it. It did not matter. They were laughing too hard to care about keeping proper rhythm, spinning and stumbling through the steps while their neighbors clapped and cheered them on. Later, as the sun began to set and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Grasha pulled Kieran aside. "Can we go home?" she asked softly. "I love this. I love our friends and this wonderful party, but I want to be alone with my husband." Kieran felt warmth spread through his chest at the word husband. "I think we have put in enough of an appearance. Let us say our goodbyes." They made their way through the crowd, accepting hugs and congratulations from everyone. Throck clapped Kieran on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger, grinning broadly. Margaret pressed a basket of food into Grasha's hands, insisting they would need to eat breakfast the next morning. The Venton children presented them with a bouquet of wildflowers, carefully picked that afternoon. By the time they finally made it back to their own cabin, the stars were out and the moon was rising. Kieran carried Grasha over the threshold, another human tradition that she found endlessly amusing. "Your customs are very strange," she said, laughing as he set her down. "Perhaps, but they are our customs now, yours and mine together." He lit the fire while she set out the food Margaret had given them. They ate a simple supper, sitting close together on the floor in front of the hearth as they had done so many times before. But tonight felt different, weighted with significance and promise. "I have something for you," Kieran said when they had finished eating. He retrieved a small wooden box from his pack, something he had been working on in secret for weeks. Grasha opened it carefully and gasped. Inside were 2 rings, carved from dark wood and polished until they shone. He had inlaid each one with a strip of copper, the only metal he had access to, hammered thin and worked into the wood in a simple but elegant pattern. "Kieran, they are beautiful. When did you make these?" "Late at night when you were asleep." "I wanted to give you something to mark this day, something you could wear always." He took one of the rings and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "A symbol of my promise to you, for as long as we both shall live." Grasha blinked back tears and took the other ring, sliding it onto his finger. "And my promise to you. I am yours, Kieran Voss, now and always." They sat together in the firelight, admiring their new rings, and Kieran thought about the journey that had brought them here. Finding Gracia half buried in snow, carrying her 5 miles through a blizzard. Those first tentative conversations, learning to trust each other. The growing realization that friendship had become something deeper. The decision to leave everything behind and start fresh. It had been difficult and frightening and uncertain, but every step had been worth it to arrive at this moment, sitting beside the woman he loved in a home they had built together. "What are you thinking about?" Gracia asked softly. "About how lucky I am. How easily things could have gone differently. If the storm had not blown me off course that day, if I had not seen you in the snow, if I had decided to keep walking. But you did not keep walking. You stopped, and you saved me, and you changed both of our lives." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it? Regret all the complications I brought into your life?" "Never. Not once." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Gracia. You gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a reason to be brave when it would have been easier to stay safe and small. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Even carrying me 5 miles through a blizzard?" she asked with a small smile. "Especially that." "My back hurt for a week afterward, but it was still the most worthwhile thing I have ever done." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and when she pulled back her eyes were shining. "Take me to bed, husband, our bed in our home on our wedding night." "As my wife commands," he said with an answering smile. They rose and moved to the bed they had built together, the one Gracia had insisted be large enough for both of them. Kieran pulled her close, and they lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms. Outside, the wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the scent of growing things and distant snow. Inside, two people who should have been enemies, who should have remained strangers, found peace and joy and love in each other's embrace. The seasons turned, summer giving way to autumn, and then to winter again. Kieran and Gracia settled into married life with surprising ease, the rhythm of their days defined by the work of the farm and the quiet comfort of each other's company. They were happy. It was a simple happiness, built on shared labor and small kindnesses. Gracia bringing Kieran hot tea while he worked in the cold morning air. Kieran rubbing salve into Gracia's sore muscles after a day of heavy lifting. Cooking meals together, their different approaches to seasoning leading to good-natured arguments and even better food. The community embraced them fully. Gracia was invited to join the women's crafting circle, where she learned new skills and taught others about orcish leatherworking techniques. Kieran helped the other farmers with their harvests and shared seeds and cuttings from his garden. They were no longer newcomers or outsiders. They were simply part of Green Hello. When winter came, fierce and cold, Kieran thought of that blizzard a year ago. The one that had brought Gracia into his life. They sat by the fire one particularly blustery evening, and he mentioned it to her. "Has it really been a year?" Gracia asked, her hand moving unconsciously to her shoulder where the scar from her clan's attack still showed. "It feels like both longer and shorter somehow. A year since I found you half buried in snow, a year since I made the best decision of my life." He pulled her closer. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we had not met? Sometimes. I would probably be dead, frozen in that snow or killed by my clan, and you would still be alone in that cabin, working your farm with no one to share it with." She was quiet for a moment. "We saved each other, I think, in different ways, but we both needed saving." "I suppose we did." Kieran kissed her temple. "I am grateful every day that fate or luck or whatever power guides the world brought us together. As am I." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Speaking of which, I have something to tell you." What is it? I am with child, Kieran. We are going to have a baby. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Kieran stared at her, his mind struggling to process the words. A baby. They were going to have a baby. Are you certain? He finally managed to ask. Very certain. I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. In about 6 months you are going to be a father. Joy, pure and overwhelming, flooded through him. He pulled Gracia into a tight embrace, burying his face in her shoulder. A baby, he said, his voice muffled against her. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? She asked, and he could hear the uncertainty in her voice. He pulled back to look at her, making sure she could see the truth in his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am thrilled, terrified, amazed, grateful. I am everything all at once. He laughed, the sound a bit shaky. A father, I am going to be a father. And I am going to be a mother. Gracia's hand joined his on her stomach. I never thought I would have this. A husband, a home, a child. My clan would never have allowed it, would have seen any sign of softness as weakness. But here, with you, I can have all of it. You deserve all of it, Kieran said fiercely. You deserve happiness and love and a family, and I am going to make sure you have it, I promise you that. They stayed up late that night, making plans and dreaming of the future. They would need to expand the cabin, add another room for the baby. Kieran would build a cradle, and Gracia would sew blankets and clothes. They talked about names, though they could not agree on any, and about whether the child would look more human or more orc. Does it matter? Gracia asked. Human or orc or some blend of both, the child will be ours. We will love them regardless. You are absolutely right, Kieran agreed. Though I hope they get your eyes. I have always loved your eyes. And I hope they get your kindness, your ability to see the good in people, even when the world tells you not to. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though not without its challenges. Gracia was sick in the mornings for the first few months, and there were times when her changing body made the farm work difficult. But she was strong and stubborn, refusing to let the pregnancy slow her down more than necessary. Kieran was attentive to the point of being overbearing, constantly fussing over her and trying to do all the heavy work himself. They had more than one argument about it, with Gracia insisting she was perfectly capable of hauling water or chopping wood. I am pregnant, not helpless, she told him after he tried to physically take an axe away from her. I need to stay strong and active. Lying around doing nothing will only make the birth harder. I know, I just worry I cannot help it. She softened at that, setting the axe aside to cup his face in her hands. I know you worry. It is one of the things I love about you, but you need to trust that I know my own limits. I will ask for help when I need it, I promise. All right, I will try to stop hovering. Try being the operative word. Margaret, who had helped deliver dozens of babies in her years, took Gracia under her wing as the due date approached. She taught her breathing exercises and positions that might make the labor easier. She also prepared Kieran for what to expect, not pulling any punches about the difficulty and danger of childbirth. It is going to be hard, she told him bluntly. Even with everything going right, birth is painful and exhausting. And with her being orc and you being human, well, we do not really know what to expect. The baby might be larger than a human infant, which could complicate things. Kieran felt fear clench in his gut. Is there anything we can do? Anything to make it safer? Just be prepared. I will be there to help, and we will do everything we can. But you need to understand that there are no guarantees. You need to be ready for that. He was not ready. How could anyone be ready for the possibility of losing the two people they loved most in the world? But he nodded and thanked Margaret for her honesty, and he tried not to let his fear show when he was with Gracia. The baby came on a warm spring evening, almost exactly 6 months after Gracia had told him about the pregnancy. Gracia's water broke while they were eating supper, and suddenly, everything was happening very fast. Kieran ran to get Margaret while Gracia paced the cabin, breathing through the contractions that were already coming strong and close together. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Kieran stayed by Gracia's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her forehead, offering words of encouragement when she had the energy to listen. Margaret directed everything with calm efficiency, and Kieran tried to take comfort in her steady presence. Gracia was incredible. Even in the worst moments when the pain was clearly overwhelming, she did not cry out or complain. She simply focused on the task at hand, on bringing their child safely into the world. Finally, as the sun rose and golden light spilled through the cabin windows, the baby was born. A lusty cry filled the air, and Margaret held up a tiny, wriggling form. "You have a son," she announced with a broad smile. "A healthy, beautiful baby boy." Gracia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but grinning. Kieran stared at the baby in wonder, taking in every detail. He was perfect, with Gracia's green skin and pointed ears, but features that were softer, more rounded than a full-blooded orc. His eyes, when they opened, were Kieran's own gray-blue. Margaret cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Gracia's arms. "Well done, my dear." "He is perfect." Gracia looked down at her son, tears streaming down her face. "He is," she whispered. "He is absolutely perfect." Kieran sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Gracia, one hand gently touching the baby's tiny fist. Their son grabbed his finger with surprising strength, and Kieran felt his heart swell with so much love he thought it might burst. "What should we name him?" Gracia asked softly. They had discussed many names over the months, but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son's face, Kieran knew exactly what felt right. "Cade," he said. "Kieran Voss, it means strong and sturdy, everything I hope he will be." "Cade," Gracia repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Kieran Voss, our son." Margaret left them alone after ensuring that both mother and baby were healthy. Kieran and Gracia lay together in bed, their son between them, and simply existed in the perfect peace of the moment. "We did it," Gracia said, her voice sleepy. "We have a family." "We do," Kieran agreed. "Our own little family built against all odds. You think he will face difficulties, being half orc, half human, probably. The world is not always kind to those who are different." Kieran looked down at Cade's peaceful sleeping face. "But he will have us. We will teach him to be strong and kind and proud of who he is. And he is growing up here in Greenhollow, where being different is normal. He will have friends and neighbors who accept him just as they accepted us." "You are right." Gracia reached out and took Kieran's hand. "And maybe, by the time he is grown, the world will have changed a bit. Maybe more places will be like Greenhollow. Maybe humans and orcs can learn to live together in peace." "Maybe," Kieran said. "And if not, then we will make sure he knows that he is loved and valued, no matter what anyone else thinks." Cade grew quickly, thriving in the clean mountain air and surrounded by love. By 6 months old, he was already crawling, his curiosity leading him into every corner of the cabin. By a year, he was walking and babbling in a mix of human words and orcish sounds that Gracia taught him. The community adored him. Throck carved him wooden toys, Margaret knitted him endless sweaters and booties, and the Venton children treated him like a beloved younger sibling. Cade was the first child born in Greenhollow, who was a blend of 2 species, and everyone took pride in watching him grow and develop. Kieran and Gracia settled into the rhythms of parenthood. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, first smiles and first words, the constant wonder of watching a new person develop and grow. It was exhausting and challenging and absolutely wonderful. On Cade's first birthday, they had a small celebration. The whole community came, bringing gifts and food and good wishes. Cade, overwhelmed by all the attention, alternated between delighted laughter and clinging to Gracia's leg. That night, after everyone had gone home and Cade was asleep in his cradle, Kieran and Gracia sat on their porch and looked up at the stars. "It has been 2 years," Gracia said quietly. "2 years since you found me in the snow." "Best 2 years of my life," Kieran replied. "Even with all the hard parts, all the challenges, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that I have you and Cade and this beautiful life we have built. It feels like a dream." "It is real, and it is ours." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for trusting me all those months ago, for letting me help you, for staying even when it would have been easier to leave, for choosing to build this life with me. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing past what I am to who I am, for being brave enough to love me when the whole world said you should not." She lifted her head to look at him. "I love you, Kieran Voss, more than I can ever properly express." "I love you too, Gracia Voss, my wife, my partner, the mother of my child. You are everything to me." They sat together in the peaceful quiet of the evening, listening to the sounds of the valley settling into night. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. A soft breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around their cabin. Inside, Cade slept peacefully, safe and loved. Kieran thought back to that day in the blizzard, to the moment when he had seen a splash of green against the white snow. He had been tired, freezing, focused only on his own survival. It would have been so easy to keep walking, to leave the unconscious orc woman to her fate, but he had stopped. He had chosen to help, even when it was difficult, even when it seemed impossible. And that one choice, that one moment of compassion had changed everything. He had found love in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely person. He had lost his old life but gained something infinitely better. He had learned that family was not about blood or species or what the world expected, but about choosing each other day after day, through all the challenges life could throw at them. "What are you thinking about?" Gracia asked, sensing his contemplative mood. "About snow," Kieran said with a smile, "and how sometimes the best things in life come from the moments that seem the hardest." "Poetic," Gracia teased gently, "but true." They sat together under the stars, hand in hand, their rings glinting in the moonlight. Inside, their son slept peacefully. Around them, their community rested, secure in their mountain valley. And in the distance, somewhere far to the south, snow fell on the mountains where their story had begun. But that was just the beginning. This, right here, right now, was their happily ever after. Hard won, fiercely protected, and built on a foundation of love that had proven stronger than prejudice, stronger than fear, stronger than the cold that had nearly claimed Gracia's life. Kieran had found an orc woman half buried in snow, and he had carried her 5 miles home on his back. In doing so, he had found his home, his heart, and his future. And he would spend the rest of his days grateful for that blizzard, for that impossible journey, for the courage to do what was right even when it was hard. Because in the end, love was always worth the effort. Love was always worth carrying someone 5 miles through the snow. Love was always worth building a new life in a new place. Love was worth everything. And they lived, the 3 of them together in their mountain valley, surrounded by friends and community, happy and whole and exactly where they were meant to be. They built more rooms onto the cabin as the years passed. They planted orchards and expanded their fields. They watched Cade grow into a strong, kind young man who was proud of both his human and orc heritage. They grew old together, Kieran and Gracia, their love deepening with each passing year. And when their time finally came, many years in the future, they went peacefully, surrounded by children and grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that they had lived good lives, full of love and purpose and joy. But that was many years away. For now, they were young and healthy and filled with hope for the future. For now, they had each other, they had their son, and they had the quiet happiness of a life built on love. And that, in the end, was everything that mattered.